The narcissist never operates alone. They thrive because enablers and silent bystanders empower their behavior. A narcissist's cruelty, manipulation, and deception cannot fully blossom without the subtle cooperation of others who allow them to keep operating unchecked. This truth is difficult to swallow because many times the pain you endured did not come only from the narcissist's direct actions, but also from the people who stood by, said nothing, or even encouraged them indirectly. To understand how deeply narcissistic abuse works, you must see that it is not simply a one-on-one battle. It is a system, a cycle, and often a social structure built on silence and complicity. When you think back on the times the narcissist mistreated you, you will likely remember moments when others witnessed what was happening. Maybe they heard the cutting words, saw the emotional abuse, or recognized the lies being told. Yet instead of standing up, instead of defending you, they chose to stay quiet. Their silence may have seemed neutral, but in reality, silence is a form of agreement. A bystander who refuses to intervene essentially hands the narcissist permission to continue. And this is how narcissists grow stronger, not just by their own manipulative tactics, but by the crowd of quiet witnesses who look away. Narcissists are skilled manipulators of environments. They do not only control the person they target, they also work to influence those around them. They will charm some people, intimidate others, and create confusion so that the lines of right and wrong blur in the eyes of the community. In workplaces, families, friendships, and even spiritual communities, narcissists know how to plant seeds of doubt and division. And when enablers go along with the narrative, or bystanders refuse to confront the reality, the narcissist feels emboldened. They sense that the environment is safe for their abuse because no one will challenge them. One of the hardest realities to accept is that sometimes the people you thought would protect you are the very ones who hand the narcissist their power. They might defend the narcissist by making excuses, saying things like, "That's just how they are," or "You're overreacting." This invalidation cuts even deeper than the narcissist's cruelty because it tells you that your pain is invisible or unworthy of attention. And so the abuse compounds. Not only do you endure the manipulation, but you also experience the isolation of knowing others refuse to acknowledge your reality. But why do enablers and bystanders play these roles? Part of it is fear. Some are afraid of confronting the narcissist because they know the retaliation will be harsh. They would rather stay on the narcissist's good side, even if it means sacrificing your dignity. Others are blinded by charm. Narcissists often present themselves as charismatic, successful, or even kind when it suits them. Many people fall for this mask and refuse to believe the darker truth. And then there are those who are simply apathetic. They do not want to be involved, so they choose the comfort of neutrality. Yet neutrality in the face of abuse is not neutral at all. It is participation. Every time someone ignores cruelty, they extend the lifespan of that cruelty. Every time someone excuses the narcissist's behavior, they strengthen their grip. And every time someone witnesses the harm but refuses to stand for truth, they become part of the wound carved into your heart. That is why healing requires more than just detaching from the narcissist. Healing requires understanding the roles others played in reinforcing the pain. You cannot fully move forward until you acknowledge that the environment around you was part of the battle. Think about the dynamics in a family where a narcissistic parent exists. Maybe one parent was the aggressor, belittling, controlling, and shaming, while the other parent remained silent, pretending not to notice or refusing to intervene. That silence told the child, "You are on your own." Or think of a workplace where a narcissistic boss humiliates an employee in front of everyone, and yet no colleague steps up to say, "This is not okay." The silence of the group adds to the humiliation, making the victim feel not only attacked, but abandoned. These scenarios are repeated across countless environments, each time proving that the narcissist alone does not hold all the power. The crowd that refuses to act gives them fuel. The narcissist thrives in shadows. They survive because enablers dim the light of truth and bystanders refuse to shine a spotlight on their actions. When no one challenges them, they feel untouchable. They believe they can rewrite reality, and often they succeed because their audience does not contest it. This is why victims often feel so crazy or lost in their own minds. It is not only the manipulation itself, but the gaslighting reinforced by everyone's silence that makes them question their worth, their perception, and even their sanity. If you were hurt by a narcissist, you must release the illusion that the pain was theirs alone to bear. You must see clearly that others contributed, whether through direct defense of the narcissist or through quiet complicity. This awareness does not mean you should carry bitterness toward every bystander for the rest of your life. But it does mean you should recognize the truth. Their choices mattered, their silence hurt, and their cooperation, whether intentional or not, helped the narcissist wound you more deeply. Acknowledging this truth is not about blame, it is about clarity. Healing begins with honesty. When you name what really happened, you take away the narcissist's power to rewrite history. You reclaim your perspective and restore your sense of reality. This is one of the most empowering steps in recovery. No longer gaslighting yourself by pretending it wasn't that bad, or maybe they didn't mean it. Instead, you boldly say, yes, it happened. Yes, others allowed it. And yes, I survived. That truth sets you free. You must also remember that the enablers and bystanders reveal their own character through their inaction. People who choose silence in the face of cruelty are showing you where their loyalties lie. They are showing you that comfort matters more to them than courage. They are showing you that protecting their own peace is more important than protecting justice. Once you accept this, you stop expecting from them what they were never willing to give: protection, loyalty, or truth. The narcissist never operates alone, and because of that, you must never blame yourself entirely for what happened. The abuse was not your fault, and the silence of others was not your burden to carry. You were placed in an environment where multiple forces worked against you, one actively harming you, and others refusing to stop it. The beauty of recognizing this is that you can finally release misplaced guilt. You can stop asking, why didn't I fight harder? Why didn't I see it sooner? And instead understand that the deck was stacked against you from the start. It wasn't weakness that kept you trapped. It was the combined weight of manipulation, enablers, and bystanders. As you grow stronger, you must choose to never play those roles in the lives of others. Refuse to be an enabler. Refuse to be a silent bystander. When you see manipulation, speak truth. When you see cruelty, defend the victim. When you see injustice, shine light into the shadows. By doing so, you not only break the cycle for yourself, but you also ensure that your presence in the world contributes to healing rather than harm. The narcissist thrives because of enablers and silent bystanders, but the truth is, their power crumbles when people stop cooperating. Darkness cannot survive where light is consistently shined. Lies cannot survive where truth is consistently spoken. And cruelty cannot survive where courage consistently rises. When you live in that awareness, you no longer feel powerless. You see that change begins with awareness, with discernment, and with the courage to stand when others remain silent. The narcissist never operates alone. They thrive because enablers and silent bystanders empower their behavior. But you are no longer blind to this truth. You now see it clearly, and in seeing it, you begin to reclaim the power that was once stolen from you. You understand that silence is not neutral, complicity is not harmless, and enabling is not love. And with that awareness, you rise above the cycle, refusing to be victimized again and refusing to participate in the pain of others. This is how you step out of the shadows and into the fullness of your healing. Would you like me to double this expansion into a full 3,000 words by weaving in real-life scenarios, biblical, spiritual references, and psychological insights about enablers and bystanders in narcissistic abuse? That will make it more complete and deeply engaging. Betrayal often comes not only from the abuser, but also from those who justified, excused, or ignored the abuse. It is one of the most painful realizations a person can face, that the wound you carry was not carved by one pair of hands, but by many. The narcissist may have been the one to deliver the cruelty, but what deepens the cut is the silence, the excuses, and the dismissal from those who stood by and chose comfort over truth. That is why betrayal feels so suffocating. It doesn't just question the character of one person, it shakes your faith in human loyalty, compassion, and justice. It leaves you wondering not just, why did they hurt me, but why did no one stop them? When people justify or excuse abuse, they are not neutral. They become part of the harm. They cloak the abuser's actions with false explanations like, that's just how they are, or they didn't mean it. They convince you to minimize your own pain, to second-guess your perception, to normalize cruelty. These individuals become partners in the abuser's scheme, perhaps not intentionally, but in effect, they are the reinforcement that keeps the abuse alive. Because an abuser without enablers loses power quickly. Abuse thrives in environments where silence is currency and excuses are the language of denial. Think about it. Every time someone told you to forgive and forget when you were still bleeding, they weren't helping you heal. They were helping the abuser escape accountability. Every time someone told you, don't take it so personally, when your soul was crushed, they weren't soothing you, they were gaslighting you into compliance. Every time a friend or family member said, I'm sure they didn't mean it, they weren't offering comfort, they were stripping you of your right to name what was real. And this betrayal, this passive collusion, often hurts more than the abuse itself because it feels like the world turned its back on your truth. There is another group, equally damaging, the ones who ignored the abuse altogether. They saw it, they sensed it, some even knew it in detail, yet they chose silence. They chose to look away. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Maybe they feared conflict. Maybe protecting their own comfort was more important than protecting your dignity. But silence in the face of abuse is agreement. Silence in the presence of injustice is complicity. And that silence can echo louder in your memory than the abuser's cruelest words. Because it tells you, you weren't worth defending, you weren't worth standing up for. Your pain wasn't important enough to risk anything for. This is the double-edged sword of betrayal. The abuser breaks your trust through direct harm, but the enablers and bystanders break your heart by showing you how many people are willing to abandon the truth. It leaves you asking, who can I trust? And that is the deepest scar narcissistic abuse leaves behind, not just the damage of what was done, but the devastation of who didn't care enough to stop it. Healing from this kind of betrayal requires immense courage. You have to allow yourself to grieve not just the relationship with the abuser, but the false image you had of those who excused or ignored it. You have to mourn the version of them you thought existed. The friend who would have stood up for you, the sibling who you thought would have defended you, the co-worker who you thought would have spoken out, the parent who you believed would have protected you. That mourning is real. That loss is valid. Because when people reveal their silence or their excuses, they reveal their priorities. And unfortunately, you often discover that their priority was never your healing. It was their own comfort, their fear of conflict, or their loyalty to appearances. But there is also power hidden inside this kind of betrayal. It sharpens your discernment. It forces you to see clearly who is for you and who is not. It teaches you that love is not proven by words, but by action. It reminds you that those who excuse or ignore abuse are showing you their limitations. They are revealing that their loyalty bends under pressure, that their courage collapses in the face of conflict, and that their version of love does not stretch far enough to protect you when it matters most. As painful as that is, it gives you the gift of clarity. It gives you the ability to stop wasting time on people who only stand beside you when it's convenient. You must also understand that excusing and ignoring abuse does not come from strength. It comes from weakness. It comes from fear of confrontation, from lack of integrity, from an unwillingness to sacrifice comfort for justice. Weak people side with power, not with truth. Weak people protect the abuser because it is easier than standing against them. And so, in the long run, their betrayal is not a reflection of your worth, but of their cowardice. This is why betrayal often becomes the greatest teacher. It teaches you that you can survive without those who abandon you. It teaches you that silence is not love. It teaches you that someone's willingness to excuse wrong behavior reveals more about them than it does about you. And it pushes you into a deeper understanding of self-reliance, self-validation, and spiritual strength. When you look back, you will realize that every person who excused or ignored the abuse was unknowingly revealing to you that they were never safe ground. They were warning signs in human form. And while the pain of betrayal is sharp, it is also clarifying. It shows you who deserves access to your soul and who does not. It strips away illusions and forces you into truth, no matter how uncomfortable. The abuser's harm may have started the wound, but the enablers and bystanders are what deepened it. Yet in that deep pain lies the seed of transformation. Because once you've seen how betrayal works, you will never again confuse silence with support or excuses with love. You will stop romanticizing loyalty from those who have none. You will learn to choose wisely, to surround yourself only with those who not only claim to care, but who will stand with you when it costs them something. And so, betrayal becomes both the wound and the medicine. It hurts because it reveals who people really are, but it heals because it frees you from false illusions. The ones who justified, excused, or ignored the abuse were not protecting you, they were protecting themselves. But their betrayal has given you the gift of clarity, and from that clarity you will rise, not more bitter, but more discerning, not more hardened, but more wise, not more isolated, but more intentional in who you allow close. Because betrayal, in the end, is not just about what others did. It is about what you will now do with the truth. You have seen the mask come off. You have felt the sting of abandonment. And now you are free, free to rebuild, free to choose differently, free to surround yourself with people whose courage matches their words, whose loyalty matches their promises, and whose actions align with love that protects, defends, and stands strong in the face of abuse. Healing requires recognizing these two types of people, releasing resentment and reclaiming your power by refusing to let them define your worth. The truth is, healing doesn't just happen because time passes. It happens when you become intentional about understanding what happened, who played a role in it, and why you will no longer give them the authority to write the story of your life. Many people get stuck in cycles of pain because they only focus on the abuser, the narcissist, the one who inflicted the direct wound. But what often keeps the wound infected is the memory of those who stood by and allowed it to happen, or those who quietly sided with the one who hurt you. Healing requires a deeper layer of awareness. It is not only about cutting ties with the narcissist, but also about confronting the reality of those who enabled, excused, or ignored the abuse. When you begin to recognize these two types of people, you start to see the patterns that once kept you chained. The first type is the enabler, the person who fed into the narcissist's lies, who cheered them on, who supported their false narratives, who perhaps benefited from the narcissist's power, charm, or manipulation. Enablers don't always look malicious on the surface. Sometimes they are friends, family members, colleagues, or even spiritual leaders who turned a blind eye because speaking the truth would have cost them something. They may have believed the narcissist's lies, or worse, they may have known the truth, but chose silence because protecting their own comfort mattered more than protecting your dignity. The second type is the bystander, the one who saw but chose not to see, who heard but acted deaf, who could have spoken up but remained silent. These are the people who sat in the background, watching the narcissist wound you, humiliate you, manipulate you, and instead of extending a hand to lift you, they folded their arms. Silence can be just as harmful as active participation because silence sends a message. Your pain doesn't matter enough for me to disrupt my own peace. That silence pierces deeply, sometimes even deeper than the narcissist's words, because it shows you that people who had the power to stand with you abandoned you. Healing requires confronting these truths, not so you stay bitter, but so you can release the weight of carrying their betrayal. Resentment will always keep you tethered to them. As long as you carry anger toward the enabler and the bystander, you are still allowing them to hold space in your spirit. Forgiveness doesn't mean you excuse what they did. It means you refuse to let their betrayal define how you see yourself. When you hold on to anger, you are still allowing them to determine your emotional climate. But when you recognize who they are, what role they played, and you consciously decide that they no longer hold power over your sense of worth, you step into true freedom. Your worth is not defined by who abandoned you. Your value is not diminished because people failed to defend you. Your identity is not wrapped up in whether the enabler or bystander ever apologizes or acknowledges their betrayal. Healing means you stop waiting for them to validate your pain. Healing means you validate yourself, you acknowledge that what happened was wrong, and you choose to live free anyway. To heal, you must also understand that these two types of people often carry their own brokenness. Enablers enable because they are afraid to face truth. They are addicted to approval, or they gain something from aligning themselves with power, even if that power is corrupt. Bystanders remain silent because they are too afraid to get involved, too consumed by self-preservation, or too numb to act courageously. Their behavior says more about their weakness than your worth. Once you see that, you stop internalizing their choices as a reflection of you. Their silence or enabling is not evidence that you are unworthy. It is evidence that they lacked the strength, the courage, or the moral compass to stand on the side of truth. Reclaiming your power means you no longer allow the betrayal to echo as a voice in your mind that says, "I wasn't worth fighting for." You replace that with the truth. Their silence doesn't measure me. Their enabling doesn't define me. You reclaim your power when you stop rehearsing the betrayal and start rehearsing the truth of who you are: worthy, chosen, valuable, whole. Releasing resentment is not easy because resentment feels like protection. It feels like if you stay angry, you are somehow holding them accountable. But in reality, resentment is a chain that keeps you bound to the very people who hurt you. The narcissist may be long gone. The enabler may have moved on with their life. The bystander may be living as if nothing happened, yet you remain stuck in an emotional prison, replaying their betrayal. Healing requires you to break that chain, not for them, but for you. The day you decide to release resentment is the day you give yourself permission to breathe again. It is the day you stop waiting for someone else to make it right, and you decide that your healing is too important to leave in their hands. It is the day you stop saying, "They owe me," and you start saying, "I owe myself peace." Reclaiming your power begins with that shift, from waiting for their accountability to taking radical responsibility for your healing. Think about it. Every moment you spend replaying their betrayal is a moment you could spend building your future. Every thought you dedicate to the enabler and the bystander is energy stolen from your purpose. When you reclaim your power, you redirect your energy back to your own life, your own calling, your own growth. You stop giving them free rent in your mind, and you start investing in yourself. Healing also requires learning the lesson so you can protect yourself in the future. Recognizing these two types of people allows you to sharpen your discernment. You begin to notice the signs of an enabler, the one who makes excuses for toxic behavior, who tells you to just let it go when you bring up your pain, who minimizes the abuse because it makes them uncomfortable. You begin to recognize the signs of a bystander, the one who grows quiet when truth is spoken, who avoids conflict even at the cost of justice, who refuses to see the obvious because acknowledging it would require courage. By seeing these patterns, you prepare yourself never to be blindsided in the same way again. You reclaim your power when you choose your circle with wisdom, when you surround yourself with people who stand for truth, who will speak up even when it's uncomfortable, who will fight for your dignity even when it costs them something. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Not everyone has earned the right to be in your inner circle. Healing requires pruning, letting go of the enabler, releasing the bystander, and making room for people who carry loyalty, integrity, and courage in their hearts. It's not about living in suspicion or bitterness. It's about living with wisdom. The pain you endured taught you valuable lessons about who deserves access to you. You no longer allow charm, titles, or positions to blind you. You no longer mistake silence for neutrality. You understand now that silence in the face of abuse is complicity. You no longer confuse enabling with loyalty. You understand that true loyalty never empowers destruction. Reclaiming your power is also about rewriting the narrative. Instead of telling the story as, they betrayed me, they abandoned me, they let me down, you begin to tell the story as, I survived betrayal, I rose from abandonment, I discovered my strength when others failed me. The focus shifts from what they did to what you became. That shift in narrative is the essence of healing. The enabler and the bystander may never change. They may never apologize. They may never admit their role. And that is okay. You do not need their apology to heal. You do not need their acknowledgement to rise. You do not need their validation to know your worth. Healing is a personal journey, a choice to take your power back, regardless of whether they ever see the truth. You reclaim your power every time you choose peace over bitterness, growth over resentment, freedom over bondage. You reclaim your power when you step into each day knowing that your future is brighter than your past because you have chosen to release the weight of betrayal. You reclaim your power when you live with the confidence that you are more than what they did, more than what they said, more than what they failed to do. This is what true healing looks like. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of strength. Not forgetting what happened, but remembering it with wisdom rather than pain. Not waiting for others to make it right, but choosing to rise anyway. Healing requires recognizing these two types of people, releasing the resentment you once held toward them, and reclaiming your power by refusing to let them define your worth. The power has always been within you. It was just buried under the weight of betrayal. Now, it is time to rise, release, and reclaim.